What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Miles and today we are going to be discussing the week ahead for crypto markets. It is a big week for crypto. We have FOMC in a couple days, which is potentially one of the biggest Fed decisions in US history. It's going to have a huge effect on not only the Bitcoin price, but the future of US monetary and fiscal policy. So that is a massive day. We also have the Arbitrum Airdrop on Thursday. That is going to have some major effects on the market that I'm going to be talking about later in this video, as well as how to actually approach the Arbitrum airdrop in terms of looking at the ecosystem, potential trades. I also want to discuss the potential altcoin rotation. Obviously, this has been mainly a Bitcoin-led pump. We've seen altcoins continuously bleeding versus Bitcoin, and the question on a lot of investors' lips right now is, when are we going to get an altcoin rotation? And if we do get one, what altcoins are going to be the best ones to position ourselves in? That's also something I'm going to talk about towards the end of the show, what my plans are to do with a potential altcoin rotation and how I'm going to trade that if it does play out, and what indicators I am looking at on my charts to get into alts, and what alts I'd actually get into at that time. That's obviously something we got to discuss. So before we get into it, make sure you subscribe if you're not subscribed. Most of the viewers that watch my videos, they're actually not subscribed. So make sure you smash that subscribe button, as well as clicking the post notification button so you're notified when I upload a video. I'm actually going to start this as a new series, which is basically going to frame the week ahead every single Monday for you guys. So if you are excited for this new series and you want to get prepared every single week for the best narratives to look out for the key dates to look out for, then nothing better than clicking that post notification bell so you're aware on a Monday morning and ready to go and attack this market in the right way. So how am I attacking the market? Well, firstly, we have to look at the Bitcoin chart, because what we essentially got was a pretty convincing breakout of range highs. So clearly for a while we've been in a range. Ever since June last year, we've been in this long range. We have deviation below during the FTX saga. Then obviously we broke back into the range and basically went sideways for a long time until we got a pretty decisive breakout, which started on the breakout of this diagonal here and also the break of mid-range, which ended up resulting in a break of range highs, whereas previous attempts to break range high actually failed. This one was successful because this Bitcoin narrative right now is so strong. So contextualizing where we currently sit with Bitcoin, if we go into the weekly chart, we can see we are currently approaching resistance. And although we did break above the 200 MA on the weekly, which is a very key level to break, and that's obviously bullish for markets, you have to note that we are approaching some sort of resistance. So how Bitcoin reacts between 28 and 30 is going to be huge. There's a chance that we do get rejected here, and that could result in Bitcoin coming down to that previous key level at 26.5. That was the first level that we broke above and saw major deviation at that level above range highs before we came back in, smashed through, and then continue to the upside. So that is the key level I'm looking at for a pullback if we do get one. But of course, there is also a chance that we just smash straight through into resistance here. And then obviously that next 31 to 32K level is the next key level to clear to send Bitcoin into the 40Ks. So we are at a critical stage for Bitcoin. I don't necessarily think now's the time to FOMO in and go too crazy on Bitcoin. But of course, FOMC this week is going to be a huge dictator of price action. So whatever the Fed comes out and says is going to have a huge effect on markets. And obviously I do have Wednesday highly on my radar in terms of potential trading opportunities. The main thing to note though from an altcoin perspective is that altcoins versus BTC have been bleeding. We've seen the ETH Bitcoin chart continue to break down. This actually looks quite terrible, to be honest, and that's because most people are buying Bitcoin. This is a Bitcoin-led pump. It's mainly a spot-driven rally. We can see from open interest that although price has been increasing, the open interest hasn't been increasing in tandem with the percentage price increases. So that indicates that a lot of this rally is being driven by spot, and a lot of that is because people are fleeing to Bitcoin in the face of what looks like an impending financial crisis in the US. It's kind of adopted this flight to safety narrative, this digital gold narrative in times of turbulence, and that's what's currently driving Bitcoin price action. That liquidity hasn't yet rotated to the alts. A bit later in the show, I'm going to talk about when I think that could happen. So if you don't want to trade Bitcoin, trade Ethereum, or any of the altcoins, we're going to get into some potential setups later. You can use the link in the description for trading on Bitget, which will give you an $8,000 sign-up bonus, and ByBit, which could give you up to $30,000 worth of sign-up bonuses, depending on how much you deposit. So links in the description if you do want to trade. It also helps support the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching these videos as well. I appreciate all the crazy support over the last few weeks. If you watched last video and you followed some of these trade setups, I think you would have done quite well. We did get that nice break of range high, great trading opportunities off the back of that. And of course, I've kept you updated with my shows and crypto banter in terms of how I've been trading it. I'm mostly closed out of a lot of my altcoin positions now because I'm waiting for something very key in the market to happen, which I want to discuss in a little bit. Sorry to keep you waiting, but there's a lot of important macro stuff we have to discuss before we get into the altcoins, because essentially macro right now is still such a key driver behind the market. Even though this has been a Bitcoin-led pump, altcoins need Bitcoin to perform. And if Bitcoin has a pullback, alts are obviously going to pull back just as hard, if not harder, because Bitcoin currently has the dominance. So there were a few reasons why Bitcoin ran, but the primary reason is because of this unofficial Fed quantitative easing and this bank term funding program, which essentially is providing a backstop to the banks via providing them with loans to be able to pay out customer deposits. That funding program essentially created a boost to the Fed's balance sheet, something that they've been quantitative tightening over the last 6 months. They essentially removed half of that tightening in the space of a week. So it was a huge monumental shift in the monetary landscape. And that's a major reason why people have been flocking to Bitcoin, because they're realizing, well, there's kind of a form of QE now coming back into the market. And although they're not saying it's QE, it is a form of loosening from a monetary policy perspective, because their balance sheet is increasing, and at the end of the day, there's going to be flow-on effects into the economy. And as an extension of that, we've also seen a coordinated central bank action to enhance the provision of US dollar liquidity, which consists of ECB and other major central banks offering 7-day US dollar operations on a daily basis. And to summarize it, the Fed essentially has opened the floodgate for fiat dollars, frequency of operations has changed from weekly to daily, the impact of tightening lessens, and it demonstrates that the Fed are concerned about market stability right now and increases the probability that they pause on Wednesday. That just added more fuel to Bitcoin's fire. Dan Tapiro did a tweet highlighting the Fed's recession model, which shows that the probability of a recession is now the greatest it's been in over 30 years. So this is pretty crazy. We've got the Fed discussing the potential rate hike in the next FOMC of 25 bips, but we're also seeing a massive increase of the chance of a recession, 54.49%. It's pretty crazy. They're hiking rates into really what is a potentially disastrous situation starting to brew. And the macro shift is really the reason why Bitcoin has been pumping. Of course, the flight to safety narrative, but also the fact people are anticipating further rate cuts. Now, in terms of the big events this week, because they will be a driver behind the market, I think the main date is FOMC on Wednesday. Now, this FOMC is one of the most monumental FOMCs we've ever had, because the Fed is faced with a very difficult decision. They can keep hiking rates, but run the risk of more things in the economy breaking, like the banks have already shown signs of cracking, or they could not cut rates, but then they're essentially backing down from their higher for longer stance that they've taken, and essentially that would be a huge sign of weakness from Jerome Powell if they didn't hike rates. So it's a very tough decision, because do you stick to your strategy? Do you see it out? Do you want to maintain the last bit of credibility that you can still muster? Or do you kind of go in the face of all that and not hike rates? But then obviously you're backing down from the stance you've had for quite some time, and inflation is still going to be a huge issue in that case. Inflation isn't going away, and the only real way to fight inflation is to raise rates. But if you raise rates, you break the economy. It's a catch-22. Kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And that's why the market is really split right now as to what the Fed's going to do. Before all of the bank collapse stuff started to happen, the probability of a 50 bips rate hike was most likely. Now that's not even in the question. Now the market's pricing in a 55.4% chance of a 25 basis point hike and a 44.6% chance of no rate hike. Now Goldman Sachs expects there not to be a rate hike because of recent stress in the banking system, and the Fed really does have a difficult decision to make. Now, how does this affect crypto? Well, I think the Fed's decision will have a huge impact on the crypto market and the stock market as well, because if they hike rates 25 bips, that shows that they are sticking to their strategy. And although it wouldn't be crazily bearish for the market, it certainly doesn't give the market a reason to explode. Whereas if they don't hike rates and there's no rate hike, I do foresee a huge price explosion, primarily in Bitcoin and also probably in the stock market as well, because that essentially marks the first signs of a true Fed pivot. And that would be extremely bullish for risk assets like Bitcoin and hopefully altcoins as an extension of that. We'll get into how I think altcoins could react in a couple minutes. So it is a very monumental date. And that's why I'm relatively de-risked ahead of Wednesday, because I want to wait to see how these probabilities shift throughout the beginning of the week. And of course, post FOMC, that will give us more clarity to actually be able to trade the market, because trading pre-FOMC, it's a little bit risky because we don't have all the information. But I think this could really set Bitcoin rallying if there is no rate hike. So you can speculate on that prior. I'm personally not doing it. I don't fancy the odds here just because it's so tight, but there certainly will be signals to be able to get into trade. So you don't have to FOMO or anything. You're going to get opportunities to get entries if there isn't a rate hike and prices do start exploding. Elon Musk says that rates need to drop immediately due to the fact that they're operating with a huge latency on their data. So essentially they're making decisions looking back so far in the past, which makes it very hard to evaluate the impact of these rate hikes. So he thinks potentially what he's alluding to is that they may have already hiked too much and they're just starting to see the effects now because the data is on a lagging basis versus what's happening in real time. The market expectations have also had a massive shift, now anticipating rate cuts at the end of the year. So even if we do get a sustained hike, the market is pricing in the fact that they will have to go back to rate cuts eventually, which is pretty damn crazy. One of the key drivers behind the market this week, or at least something that's claimed the attention of many Twitter users, podcast listeners, and even the general mainstream media, is the Balaji bet. He essentially bet $2 million that Bitcoin would hit $1 million in price in the next 90 days. It was an absolutely crazy bet that basically hinges on hyper-Bitcoinization in the face of mass US currency debasement and inflation. Although I don't think Balaji is correct with this prediction, and I don't even think he himself has conviction in that prediction, I think that bet is being used as a vehicle to perpetuate the narrative of hyper-Bitcoinization and get people's attention focusing on the current state of fiat and the US economy. So I do think it is a bit of a marketing ploy to get eyeballs on this narrative, and that could have knock-on effects for Bitcoin, positive knock-on effects, of course, but I don't think in and of itself Balaji maybe even necessarily has conviction in this bet, because frankly, the world isn't going to collapse in the next 90 days and Bitcoin certainly isn't going to hit $1 million. And if it does hit $1 million, well, I think something much worse has happened. There would be crazy turmoil, fallout, economic collapses, poverty, war, terrible effects if this actually does occur. So I don't hope it happens. Even though a $1 million Bitcoin sounds good in theory, well, the reason that would occur is not because of Bitcoin price appreciation, but extreme US dollar devaluation, which is not really what we want. So I don't want Balaji's prediction to become true, but he had some very valid points in his initial thread, although the date maybe was a little bit rushed. This is something that could play out. So it's very interesting to hear his opinion. Clearly got the attention of the entire crypto world and even the mainstream media as well, as everyone speculates on whether he will be right or not. So there's a lot of talk about Bitcoin right now, and clearly it's been dominant in terms of price action, but could altcoins catch a bid at some point? Will there be an altcoin rotation? Because typically what we see in these cycles is profits do filter down from Bitcoin into the altcoins. Well, I do want to give you guys my plan for how I'm approaching alts right now, and what conditions I would need to see from a price action perspective that would dictate my transition heavier into altcoins and out of Bitcoin. So I want to get into that plan and have a look at also some of the altcoins that I'm looking at under that umbrella. Before we get into the altcoins though, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of the show, NordVPN. If you do want to get yourself a VPN, you can use the link in the description and get yourself a 59% discount on a VPN, which costs only $3 a month. So there's a 30-day back money guarantee if you don't like it. So if you're not using it, you can get your money back. But of course, in this market, you should be using a VPN. You don't necessarily have to use my VPN. Just use any VPN. But I do believe Nord's a good one, and you can get a discount using the link. So the opportunity is there for you if you do want to use it. But make sure to protect yourself online, especially when trading alts, especially when degenning on different dexes and using a MetaMask. You need to keep your identity protected, and you need to protect yourself against hackers. It's extremely important to keep your identity safe, and it also has other cool stuff like you can watch Netflix overseas and all that fun stuff that you get with a VPN like NordVPN. So link in the description to that if you want to sign up with the 30-day back money guarantee. And without further ado, let's get into the altcoin discussion. So this is the path to alt season. You've probably seen this graphic before, and essentially what it outlines is the phases that the market tends to follow in terms of where liquidity rotates. So typically what we see is a Bitcoin pump that leads the overall market rally. Then we see profits phase into Ethereum. Then we see profits flow into large caps, mid caps, and then lastly, your small cap altcoins, which then explode and eventuate in a massive phase 4 alt season where everything just goes up and euphoria kicks in, etc. So in order to work out when a potential altcoin rotation could happen, the first thing we need to do is work out where we are in the alt season chart, because the market started rallying, Bitcoin started pumping. Where do we currently sit? Well, obviously we're still in phase 1. This is at the very beginning. There hasn't been an altcoin rotation. We've actually seen Bitcoin rallying and most altcoins versus the BTC pairs declining. Even on ETH Bitcoin, we can see this chart's absolutely been tanking and it just looks bad for altcoins versus Bitcoin. This is a Bitcoin-led pump. But typically what we see is money starting to flow into Ethereum. That gives us that first indicator that phase 2 is about to start. And that's when ETH pumps versus BTC and money rotates into alts. Now, do I think a rotation is going to happen? I do. I do believe at some point it can happen. When is it going to happen? Well, it could happen as soon as FOMC. If there's no rate hike, it could also take potentially months. If this Bitcoin rally just keeps going and then eventually we get a little bit of liquidity siphoning down, who knows? You can't put a time frame on it, but there are technical ways to trade this where you don't need to speculate based on time. You can simply use the data right in front of you, the price action right in front of you to make better investing decisions. So what is my plan and what data am I looking at? Well, the first thing I want to see is an ETH BTC reversal. I want to see a break back into this key range on the ETH BTC chart, and then I want to see continuation to the upside, which could potentially result in a break of this blue line, which is a key diagonal trend. Once you start breaking this line here, so if ETH somehow reclaims, breaks above the 200 MA on the 4 hourly, then breaks above the diagonal here and the top of its range, then of course this would be an ETH season and a lot of altcoins are going to start ripping at that point. But until ETH reclaims the bottom of its range and gets a significant bounce to the upside, I'm not entering altcoins too heavily. Now, I am having some plays in the Arbitrum ecosystem. I'm doing some stuff on DEXs and DeFi, and I'm still involved with altcoins, but I'm not longing altcoins or going super heavy altcoins versus Bitcoin until we see a slight reversal. Just because I don't really want to speculate on when the rotation is going to happen. I would rather wait for the rotation to start happening, maybe miss a few days, but then get a much higher probability trade of a continued alt season than kind of trying to speculate on it. So just keep in mind where we sit in terms of the ETH BTC chart. This is going to be your number one indicator as to whether the altcoins are starting to pump. But what I do believe is that if Bitcoin consolidates for an extended period of time, we will start to see liquidity siphon off into alts. I mean, if Bitcoin pumps to, let's say, 30 to 32K, that major level on my weekly chart, and let's say we just consolidate in this range, that could give altcoins a license to explode. At some point, we could see a huge rotation. And similarly, Bitcoin could have a pullback to that 26.5 region, start consolidating, have a break to the upside, and then we could see a rotation into alts then. We don't necessarily know when. All we know is that there are going to be the signs, ETH BTC being one of them, that money is starting to rotate into alts. The other sign is the BTC pairs on individual charts. Let's just use Phantom BTC as an example to contextualize what I'm talking about. So on the Phantom BTC chart, we actually have seen a slight rally to the upside, but in general, this trend is still relatively bearish. On the daily chart, you can see Phantom BTC is approaching resistance, and although we can come up into this region, what I would like to see is a flip of resistance into support, and then continuation to the upside, and then we can come and test those previous levels from the beginning of February. So Phantom actually, relative to other alts, is looking quite strong. If you look at, let's say, Solana BTC, for example, just a random altcoin, although it did get a bounce today, look how terrible this chart looks. Let's look at AVAX BTC. That chart also looks terrible. You just want to start seeing a little bit of life from these alts before you long them. I think Phantom actually looks better than some others, but by and large, the altcoins still don't look great. I mean, you could basically write in any altcoin you want. Gala BTC, which is one of the main gaming coins, that still looks weak. So you want to see reversals from a lot of these coins before you consider longing them versus BTC, at least with size. Of course, you can DCA in, but for me, I'm just waiting for a reversal on that ETH BTC chart, and then I'll make decisions around altcoins that I get into. So what altcoins do I have in my purview? Well, the first thing that's undeniable right now is the Arbitrum ecosystem, because essentially the airdrop is in 3 days. And I do think that's going to be a massive liquidity injection into the Arbitrum Eco. Now, a lot of the Arbitrum Eco tokens are pumped, so I wouldn't necessarily ape in, but I would be very aware of the fact that this airdrop is going to have positive effects on the market in general. I think it will act as a form of stimulus. I mean, if we actually look at the total airdrop amount, there's going to be 1.2 billion ARB airdropped, which is 12.75% of the total airdrop allocation. That is a lot of money. If the Arbitrum token's worth $1 at launch, let's say, that's over $1 billion of, I guess, stimulus in one way coming into the market, because people are going to have access to funds that they didn't have before. Like if you have a $10,000 Arbitrum airdrop and your wallet had nothing in it before, you're $10,000 richer than you were before. And you're going to use that $10,000 maybe in the ecosystem. You might buy other altcoins. You might do a variety of things with it in crypto. So it will act as a form of stimulus. The only thing to note, the major caveat to that is it's not a pure stimulus, because you will see outflows out of some other coins. I don't know whether it'll be stables, Bitcoin, ETH. There has to be outflows to give a project a certain valuation, because there has to be buyers to buy at a certain price to maintain a certain value, and outflows can come from other projects. So it's not pure stimulus, but it is going to have a net positive effect on the market as a whole. Now, how much will Arbitrum be worth? I am a lucky recipient of Arbitrum, and if you've been following me on Twitter or my banter shows, you probably also would be, because I've been covering how to get an airdrop for months. Last October, I did my thread. If you followed those steps, you would be eligible for an Arbitrum airdrop, potentially thousands of dollars worth of an Arbitrum airdrop. I think it'll be, I mean, if we kind of put a conservative estimate on the price, we could just assume it'll be worth the same as Optimism, and that would see roughly $1.10 Arbitrum, if we just want to compare it purely to Optimism. The only thing is that the thing that makes me think it could be worth more than Optimism is the fact that Arbitrum is a stronger network fundamentally. It has 2 times the active addresses, 2.5 times the transactions, 4 times the amount of contracts deployed. The network in general is stronger than Optimism, so we could genuinely see it higher than OP. So I've seen estimates as high as $5 to $10, even $40 upon launch of the Arbitrum token. So it could potentially go crazy on the first day. In fact, I expect it to be highly, highly overvalued within the first couple days as people speculate before things start to settle down. I do think there are huge trading opportunities though, because there will be a window between when the Arbitrum token launches on a lot of dexes and gets tier 1 exchange listings like Binance, like Coinbase, like ByBit, like KuCoin. And when it does launch on those exchanges, you're probably going to see an exchange listing pump. And in the meantime, if you can scoop up some decent priced longs on Arbitrum, you could expose yourself to some nice gains. So it's going to be a very volatile trading day on Thursday for Arbitrum. I think we likely see the token launch super high, drop right down. Then we see a massive swing to the upside once it's listed on exchanges before it settles down. Basically, the Aptos playbook, the Blur playbook, the Ape playbook from those airdrops, you can maybe line them up on your charts and compare that to Arbitrum, and see if it's kind of following a similar trend and trade accordingly. It's going to create huge opportunities for trading on the day. I will keep you updated with a banter stream, link to my banter playlist in the description, as well as potentially, obviously, Twitter tweets, but also maybe I'll even do a live spaces on the day. I just have to see on the day. So I think, yeah, it'll affect the Arbitrum ecosystem positively. It will probably increase yields across the Arbitrum DeFi ecosystem, because there's going to be ARB-specific incentives, which will likely increase TVL on a lot of these dApps, and also it'll have positive flow-on effects for the crypto market as a whole. Just on this first point, the reason why it could act as a form of stimulus for the Arbitrum ecosystem is because there's a lot of lazy people that are probably going to get an airdrop and aren't even going to bridge off Arbitrum. So I think a lot of the liquidity ends up flowing back into Arbitrum protocols, because not everyone is going to bridge off. Now, a lot of people will, maybe even the majority will, but there will be a percentage of people that stay on Arbitrum and trade on Arbitrum-related dApps. For example, if you have a $10,000 airdrop on Arbitrum and you convert it to USDC or DAI on the Arbitrum network, maybe you want to trade those coins. What if you want to open a Bitcoin long? What if you want to short Ethereum? You're going to want to do so on a perp dex like GMX or GNS. Could trading volume on those exchanges increase? Potentially, I think so. Could we also see, due to the ARB incentives, TVL increasing on a lot of dApps? Potentially, I think so. So there are a few dApps to look at. Obviously, the Arbitrum protocols. You got Dopex, Radiant, Arcadium, which is a gambling protocol. What other ones do I like? Magic, that's also running off the back of gaming, the gaming narrative, as well as Arbitrum. GNS, like I touched on before, Vela, that's another exchange. I'm not saying ape into these. I'm just saying observe how the market reacts to them upon launch, monitor the TVL, monitor the statistics, and if you see crazy inflows but price isn't moving much, maybe buy some. That could be something you look at doing. I'm personally long GNS, and I have been for quite some time. I got entries at around $1.50, $2, and I've been holding, taking some profits. That is my exposure to the Arbitrum launch, but if you don't have exposure, maybe something worth considering. Now, I wouldn't ape now. I'd definitely wait for FOMC. I'd wait to see which tokens are showing strength versus BTC as well, but the Arbitrum ecosystem could be a major beneficiary. So what are the other narratives that I'm looking at if we do see an altcoin rotation? Well, there are a few things. Runner XBT did a good thread on some of the upcoming events. I think the first one is Matic ZKVM. That I think is going to result in potentially some positive price action for ZK protocols. Obviously, underneath this basket, you've got IMX. They have a big announcement coming. Probably wouldn't buy into an announcement pump. You've got Polygon, Mina, Loopring. You've got Mute, Dust, some of the more degen ones. There's a list here of some even more degen coins. Frin, Colt, Rail, ZKS, Pivx, D, SLA. I don't know anything about them, but I just know in general, ZK tokens in the lead up to Polygon, ZKVM, they could perform decently. That's just something in my purview for this week. And I think it is happening next week, but there's a chance it could get delayed. But I think some of those ZK projects are worth looking at. We've got ETH Shanghai upgrade as well. So Lido, Rocket Pool, Anchor, there are potentially going to be a few trade setups there. I probably won't be buying spot for a lot of these tokens, but I will look for confluence on their pairs with Bitcoin, breaking key resistance levels, as well as their US dollar pairs to try and get some entries. So those are the narratives I'm looking at for now. I think it's still Shanghai, ZK, and Arbitrum. And then I'm also looking into AI. I think although AI ran probably too much prematurely, it was kind of like a very hyped narrative with not much to substantiate it. I think it's undeniable that the AI chatter in the real world isn't going away. ChatGPT isn't going away. The announcements for AI aren't going away. And people need a way to speculate on AI, and crypto is just an easy way to do it, even if they aren't directly affiliated. So although I think it may be a bit of a hot air narrative, I'm still looking at AI protocols that are showing signs of life and have good setups because they do get violent pumps. So I'm not holding these spot long. I am simply waiting for trading opportunities and I'm taking them. For example, Agix and FET, on my banter show last week, I said I was longing them on the breakout of their flags and they broke out and they exploded to the upside. We see Agix exploded out of its flag. It's now coming down to consolidate. But when these things do pump, they pump. It went up 20% and there was great profits to be made there. So we do get pumps in AI coins. I am kind of just monitoring them, looking for setups. This is the key level on Agix, this 55.7 level. If you break that, flip that into support, especially on a higher time frame like the daily, that could be a decent long. You've also got FET as well. It's a little bit further away from its range high, but that's at 47.5. So if it can get up there, then that's a potential long. We're just going to need to see our price reacts in that range. But if you do get confirmation above, then I think, that could be an indicator that AI starts to run. So I'm affirming all my narrative-based theses with price action and charting, because that is the way for me to get my entries. But now you guys at least have an idea of my thought process behind some of the stronger narratives and what I'm looking at. And yeah, it's going to be a massive, massive week. Of course, if you want to trade any of these altcoins, trade Bitcoin, ETH, you can do so using the link in the description. We've got a link to Bitget with an $8,000 sign-up bonus, as well as a link to ByBit with a $30,000 sign-up bonus. And remember, if you're going to trade on a DEX, protect yourself with a NordVPN. It has a 30-day back money guarantee. It's only $3 a month. So with that out of the way, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. Let me know in the comments below how you think this week's going to go, because it is no doubt going to be a volatile week. Do you think it's bullish? It's a bullish week? Do you think it's a bearish week? For me, the price action's bullish, so we trade with longing in mind. If we start to break key ranges, then we flip short. I probably wouldn't flip massively short until we get like a very key rejection of the 28 zone for Bitcoin, as well as obviously a flip back into the range, and then you're looking at a complete breakdown. But until then, generally on the macro, I think you can kind of ride with the market momentum here, which is bullish, and look for some altcoin setups and just make sure you have key stop set in place. So if you're buying alts, if you're buying Bitcoin, just have your stop set in place. So when we start to flip key levels, you aren't necessarily exposing yourself to huge downside and round tripping. I think that's really important to have clear invalidations, because a lot of the altcoins you buy today, they probably aren't long-term 5-year holds. They're probably more so, shorter-term trades to take advantage of volatility, which is great, but make sure you differentiate time frames whenever you do trade. Okay, hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you probably later in the week for another update. Of course, though, I'll be on Crypto Banter. Link in the description to that playlist, as well as my Twitter. I'll see you guys later. Peace.